So the next team is Team Mare Salutaris, and they will talk about proposals of Maritime Pandemic Code. Please welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are Team Mare Salutaris, and we're here to propose Maritime Pandemic Code, which we believe will be the breakthrough for the current struggling maritime sector amid the pandemic crisis. We'll be addressing our proposal in 5 parts: overview, issue, solution, proposal, and the conclusion. Let us first take a look at how our proposal looks like in abstract. First of all, we'll identify the 3 significant issues caused by the COVID-19 and elucidate the dire necessity of MPC as a holistic approach. We then will specify the technicalities of the code regarding its scope and codify solutions. But before moving on, let us first clarify how our proposal ties back to the IMO's organizational roles and responsibilities. The 5 IMO strategic directions that we ought to solve through the proposal are laid out on the slide. Let us now move on to the problems. The exigency caused by the COVID-19 has exposed 3 major vulnerabilities within the maritime sector. First of all, compliance with IMO instruments has become virtually impossible. A number of certificates requires renewal, including but not limited to certificate of proficiency, certificate of competence, and medical certificates. Generally, those documents have practiced in-person inspection or education. Inspections and renewal for vessels also largely require inspectors to board the vessel, causing inevitable contact between people. Such circumstances causes an ineluctable violation of current regulation. Although relevant authorities have taken action, we still believe there are rooms for improvement that need to be made. This is because that those measures are vague, lack legal binding power, and cannot ensure the maritime safety, thereby fundamentally contradicting the international legislative system or the mandatory regulation. Secondly, with pandemic-induced uncertainties, the safety of maritime safety cannot be guaranteed. With vessel inspection personnel taking extra precautionary measures, vessel inspection has become intangible, with vessel deficiency being unnoticed. Vessels with attainable deficiency proceeding to a next destination is a cause for significant safety concern. Also, with revalidation being intangible within the situation, a mere extension or grace period cannot guarantee the competence and the proficiency of seafarers. Seafarers' fatigue and medical issues are also emerging with severity. Currently, hundreds and thousands of seafarers are stranded on board beyond their contracts due to the crew changes being suspended. What's more, it has been increasingly difficult for seafarers to receive legal and medical protection regarding the regulations regarding the shore leave. Collectively, these issues heighten the level of fatigue, summing up to the grounds to human errors. Last but definitely not the least, global supply chain is also at high risk. Current extra measure imposed on CIQ has resulted in global supply chain collapse. This trickles down to the individuals and companies failing to meet the demands, and individuals being deprived of essential commodities, especially third world citizens who are the most vulnerable. The cost instability of maritime commerce might lead to maritime transportation being deemed unreliable, eventually fluctuating the shipping costs and related expenses. One focal concession to be made here is that COVID-19, unfortunately, will not be the last health emergency that the human race is going to face, also flagged by the World Health Organizations. The pandemic's reoccurrence and its potential in near or far future suggests the urgent need for sustainable health preparedness. Preemptive measures need to be taken and established to better deal with future outbreaks, and we firmly believe that MPC can be a head start. The solutions that we ought to solve and the problems that listed are relatable to numerous international organizations as listed on the slide. However, the solutions in the specific that we propose today will solely focus on IMO, with full recognition of its scope and organizational roles. Also, upon due consideration, MPC shall be attempting to solve the issues solely in the view of public law.
Now we have been identified the issues, let us talk about the measures to be taken. As you can see on the screen, the solutions can be put into two categories. The items to be made mandatory, coded as A's, and the items to be made recommended, coded as B's. We'll now elaborate how the solutions can be applied to the issues we have identified. The first major issue was the difficulty complying with regulations. To deal with the issues regarding the renewal of certificates and the vessel inspections, it is vital that we codify necessary measures that already exist to ensure their legitimacy. This shall establish grounds for enforcement while settling technicalities at the same time. However, we must note that doing so cannot be the exclusive solutions. Therefore, the IMO must develop an alternative certificate renewal method using IT to better ensure compliance with existing regulations. The alternative methods shall be promoted with Stcw compliant MET courses, allowing parties involved to effectively renew their certificates. The methods shall be integrated into PRISMS, an abbreviation of Platform for Remote Inspection, Surveys, and Certificate Management of Ships. PRISMS is devised to integrate multiple remote functions into a single platform to aid the maritime industry even in the times of pandemics. Further details shall be dealt with as we address other issues. The next major issue was the fact that the maritime safety is at risk. Regarding the issue, we urge the IMO to adopt PRISM's integrated certificates renewal method to ensure compliance. Next up, regarding the medical issues and fatigue of seafarers, we would like to recommend member states to facilitate better medical access for seafarers. Although not an obligation, we firmly believe that observing the recommendations would greatly improve maritime safety and the welfare of the seafarers. It is impossible to discuss maritime safety without vessels, and our next solution focuses heavily on vessel inspections. Originally, we looked into the possibility of complete remote inspection of vessels to eliminate physical contact. After interviewing a number of related personnel, we realized that remote surveys can only be used to a certain extent, and fully relying on them is unrealistic. Consequently, we accepted that onboard inspection had to take place, and the only sensible solution would be to devise a new scheme that minimizes physical contact. The new scheme shall provide PPE requirements, all the while utilizing PRISM's remote survey where applicable. Referring to Paris MOU guidelines may save time as it contains exemplary measures. The last issue was that the global supply chain is at risk. As we have talked about vessel-related risk, we'll now focus on seafarers for this matter. We urge that the IMO requires all member states to designate seafarers as key workers and acknowledge the same to foreign nationals. Please refer to the slide for the proposed details regarding the matters. To avoid violating sovereignty, we emphasize that the member states fully reserve the right to take measures for national safety. We also recommend that member states exempt seafarers from certain restrictions, such as nationwide shutdowns for limited purposes, such as MAT for certificates. As recapped on this slide, each issue is entangled with different solutions over a number of IMO instruments. This makes separately dealing with IMO instrument extremely time-consuming and inefficient. Therefore, we would like to propose the MPC, a new code that can singularly deal with multiple instruments.
Thank you, Hyung. Right, to rephrase and emphasize the new concept, we're proposing a new code, a new instrument, that just by simply adopting it, revises and amends multiple IMO instruments at once, thereby reducing time and procedures significantly. All right. Excuse me. So, as you have seen on the previous slide, the Maritime Pandemic Code shall consist of 3 parts. And on the right side of the screen, you guys could see the simplified diagram of the Maritime Pandemic Code. As the core of MPC is meant to be binding, it is integral that the details of MPC are implemented into existing IMO documents. There are several ways of doing so, the standard being the explicit acceptance method. This method, however, is extremely time-consuming. Therefore, it is not suitable for MPC. So, we came up with a solution for each major conventions. As for SOLAS and the Lone Line Convention, the regulations shown on the slide will be made regarding the details and regarding surveys and certificates. The adoption of the new protocol shall include the certificate validation utilizing IT, which we mentioned earlier as PRISMs. And for the Lowline Convention, we will be, the articles shown on the slide will be revised, excuse me. Next up, MARPOL takes a different approach from SOLAS or Loadline conventions. For instead of revising them, we are going to amend them by annexes. On the right side of the screen are MARPOL certificates that has expiry dates, and on the left are its corresponding annexes that needs to be amended accordingly. Amendments shall be made regarding revalidation of certificates and regarding the details shown on the slide. In addition, a new chapter shall be established in the highlighted annexes, similarly in fashion to the Polar Code. Next, Stcw and Sdcwf. For these conventions as well, the same amendment approach shall be taken. For both conventions, Chapter 1, general provisions shall be revised, for it deals, amending it will ensure the following chapters to comply with the MPC. As for Stcw only, Chapter 6 will also be amended because it deals with METs, or maritime education and training courses. The last major convention we're going to deal with is the Facilitation Convention. And it is heavily affiliated with the designation of seafarers as key workers. As you can see, on the first section of the Facilitation Convention, a concise and clear definition of key workers shall be provided because despite IMO's repeated and accentuated usage of the term key worker, a solid definition has never been established. Therefore, it is crucial that we define the term universally. Also, we should keep in mind that we should add a section regarding special provisions for pandemic situations, but under the premise that they do not obstruct the normal operation of other sections in non-pandemic situations. Right, so until now we have talked about how we will be dealing with it. And this is a recap of our presentation shown like this. And so, therefore, Mare Salutaris proposes the IMO to take holistic measures to revise and amend existing measures in block via the adoption of Maritime Pandemic Code. Doing so shall bring us one step closer to Mare Salutaris, a clear, clean, and healthy ocean free of diseases. Thank you very much. Please stay healthy.
Thank you very much. So if you have any questions, please raise your hands. Yep, from Judge.
Thank you for your great presentation. Very interesting. It's the Maritime Pandemic Code. Yeah, you're naming your team. And so your proposal is Maritime Pandemic Code. Is it independent code compare with the IMO conventions? That is one question. As you know, after pandemic and before pandemic, almost is many people call to the ACBC. And so I think is before Maritime Pandemic Code, after Maritime Pandemic Code, what is the most important benefit for shipping company or seafarer? That is a second question.
I think that's a very considerable questions to be, and I think that's a valid point. We also had a really deep considerations about whether it should be an explicit code that we register, and what is the clear exclusivity from the existing regulation, the current being. So to clarify, I think it's a code, and we firmly believe it is a code. However, it's not a code that only simplifies themselves, but rather integrates a lot of amendments and revisions as of other treaties. About the exclusivity, I think the biggest thing, first of all, is the designation of key workers, which hasn't been exercised, although there was a lot of efforts or encouragement to do so. I think that's the first thing. And given key workers, seafarers will also be able to be exempt from the regulations they are currently being in, or the medical and legal protection they are deprived of. Furthermore, about the individual corporates or financial institutions. The clear thing is that what we revision here is also a fast-track policy that we also talked about in the slide. So what this is giving exemption policies for voluntary countries who are okay to opening in, and giving a business a fast track, which is being not really a target of the quarantine, which actually delays a lot of periods, delays a lot of procedures within the business. I think that's a clear exclusivity that we have clearly understood through observing the current pandemic crisis. And I think that's clearly necessary within this current maritime sector. Thank you.
Yeah, and to add to my colleague here, so to shorten the answer will be yes, it is a code, and it will be a code that takes a similar stance as the Polar Code. And I'm sorry, sir, but could you please rephrase the second question, please?
Yeah, my second question is, what is the most important thing, the benefit for a shipping company or a seafarer, according to the Maritime Pandemic Code?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I think we gave you a sufficient answer about it. But if you have further questions, please inquire.
I'm sorry, one more, the experts, rule makers, think about it is possible to amendment of the existing IMO conventions, without the Maritime Pandemic Code. That question, what is your idea to dispense this kind of thing?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Well, that is where we originally started from, and it is to considerably save time, because individually amending or revising IMO instruments would take lots of time and lots of man hours. So we decided that by adopting the Maritime Pandemic Code, we will be able to holistically approach the matter, sir. Did that sufficiently answer your question, sir, or did I?
Okay.
I'm sorry, too much time for me. Yes.
Yeah, let's
Another
move on to the
question
next
to
question.
follow.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
Grand Blue.
Thank you for your thorough analysis on your proposal. And this delegation has some concerns about the solution that you think should be mandatory about A3. You said that vessel inspection using IT for remote survey is needed. However, taking this COVID-19 situation, we don't have the certainty that when this pandemic situation would be over. So while the remote survey is kind of temporary, so do you have any solution for the ship certificate for the long-term perspective?
First of all, I think that's a very valid question. But to clarify, our proposals are not designed for a sustainable every situation that we're trying to incorporate. We're dealing with a specific situation called pandemic, and we're trying to deal with the pandemic problems that have been caused right now. So the clear thing here is that the remote inspections right now needs dire necessity. And the clear thing here is that by doing remote inspections and incorporated measures, we have clearly gave a precise understanding and justification of how that can be actually accelerated and also be exercised within the practical scope. But if you also talk about sustainability, I don't think that remote inspection will simply disappear just because pandemic just disappears, right? Clear thing is that remote inspection system that we call PRISMs can still be sustained throughout all the procedures in which it can accelerate or actually make those procedures more efficient for seafarers to deal with. So I think that's a clear thing that we should clarify. But thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Next question from George.
Sorry, is there any question over there?
Okay, yeah, from George. Yeah, let's yeah.
Before giving the floor, I'd like to question very simple question. I just helping out my previous colleagues' question about it. Your holistic approach for pandemic situation, I think this is chaos and extraordinary situation. I understand that your approach is holistic approach. By the way, I think IMO convention already exists to prevent this kind of situation. Why IMO convention is not apply for this kind of situation? Why MPC is required this situation? Because if pandemics happened every time we need this kind of code. Do you think?
No, sir. By simply establishing the Maritime Pandemic Code this time, it'll stay in the existing regulations, and we will not have to devise any more of pandemic-related codes. And as for the related IMO instruments that you've mentioned at the beginning, sir, could you please clarify what IMO documents you are referring to, sir?
Sorry, I cannot
Attacking
find
Georgie.
out. I can find out quite exact convention now. But anyway, this kind of isolated code should be included the IMO convention already. I believe that. By the way, this MPC code is required this exact extraordinary situation. But my question is, if similar pandemics happen, we have to prepare another code. So I think more general code we need it. So I want to ask you what we have to prepare that kind of situation. If we are not unexpected issues happen, this code should be reformed again. So my question is like that.
Yeah, I think that's a very considerable and valid question. To answer it, I think there are 3 paths that we can give you a productive answer. First of all is that, yes, IMO regulations are really well structured, but still there are loopholes there in which we have clarified in the speech. I think that's such context in which pandemic is specialized, manifested, is something that we're trying to solve through the code. Second thing is that, yes, we have to revise other situations of pandemic. But I think there are 2 ways in which MPC are preventing it. First of all is that we're doing preemptive measures in order to have the maritime safety being ensured. It is to say that we're giving a preemptive measure so that other pandemic codes, other pandemic situations, and the emergency that we clearly told you can be prevented to some extent. Second thing is that if we make a code at initial stage, one clear thing that we can ensure is that we don't have to make a big revision or big amendment the next time when pandemic arises, which means that we have a similar context and the connotations within the code, which means that the pandemic can simply include it in a specific reason or amendment, which not a clear revision or code will be necessary at that time. So I think that's a clear way in which we can at least marginalize the thoughts that you actually have. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think we don't have any more time, so I think we should finish here. So thank you very much. Team Mare Salutaris, please return your seat. Thank you very much.